gather round for another episode of The Reaper's Rigs. This is the story of a malevolent shadow visiting upon a religious-run orphanage. The account comes to us from the recently deceased male 96. Died of ingesting an expired communion wafer. Our story begins at a very old, very poor orphanage. It was on the outskirts of a small village. When all 8 children who lived there were asleep, the nun decided to go into town for some groceries. It was left to the priest to watch things until she got back. All around the church was tall grass and a narrow path that led to a gazebo. So the priest found himself there, taking a breath of fresh air. Then suddenly a flash overhead, and then a loud bang, as though something had fallen out of the sky. The priest looked to where the sound was, and there could see that something was on fire. But before he could think, something too small to be seen over the tall grass scurried by. By the time the priest looked back, he discovered a long shadow entering the orphanage. A chill ran down his spine. Clearly rattled, the priest went to the back door himself, opened it, and then saw the door-lined long hall which he needed to cross, one squeaky step at a time. It was silent. If there was someone in the orphanage, they were being very quiet as they moved, or were not moving at all. The priest first went to the girl's room at the end of the hall and waited outside the door to listen. Beyond it he could hear no one stirring, and so put his hand on the doorknob and opened it. That room inside was very dark. He needed to step to the first bed, where he found young Rachel sleeping. It appeared as though the loud crash had not woken her. We continued to the next bed, to find no one there, and then to the next. No one, and then to the next, until he made his way to the back wall, where he found all 7 girls huddled together, staring with wide eyes at him, too terrified to speak. When he knelt down, one of them piped up in a very, very small voice.
There's a horrible, long shadow under the bed.
when he turned, could see nothing in the very dark space under the bed. Even when he crossed the room to turn on the light, he found himself in a vantage point that he could still not see clearly there. He went to the bedside, Rachel still asleep, and bent over to look. Slowly lowered himself down. Finally, he peered under the bed and saw nothing there. Except just then they all screamed, and this screaming woke Rachel up. Rachel herself became scared and started to cry, and this made the priest furious.
That's enough!
He yelled and continued.
If there's something in the orphanage, I'll find it.
Then locked the door with 8 screaming children behind it. The priest continued to look through the orphanage, one door at a time, until he was about halfway through, when a small shadow caught his eye. It moved quickly down the hall and out the back door. The priest followed along, thinking that whoever is attached to the shadow must be the intruder. Outside again, he could hear the wind howling, and in the distance could still see the light of something burning. Too, he could hear someone crying. He walked down the steps and could see a hole in the lattice that covered a small crawl space under the church. So the priest got on his knees and crawled underneath. It was very dark there, but could see a form in the distance. The closer he got, the more it sounded like a girl crying. Finally, when he was next to it, it spoke with a voice that sounded like Rachel's.
I've been disconnected from my body.
The severed shadow somehow said. Bizarre though it was, the priest exited the crawl space and returned to the locked door, beyond which the 8 girls had stopped screaming. He opened the door, and the first thing he saw was a very tall shadow connected to Rachel. Her body had been elongated impossibly. Her arms had been stretched. 2 were her legs. And she had eaten all the rest of the children. Another delightful memory to share with your friends. 1, 2. Rachel Severed Shadow said. Rachel Severed Shadow said. Rachel Severed Shadow said. Say that 3 times fast.